Hi, and thanks for joining us in this open forum where we're going to have a discussion based around sexism and racism in the workplace and other places where we frequent. I'm Karla, Espino, and I'm here with a few panelists. We have Ricardo, Tim, Lou, Denise, and Adam. They represent different walks of life and industries such as the public sector, the service industry, nursing, and engineering. Let's just dive right in. Have you ever experienced sexism in the workplace?
Well, I've been privy to not have ever experienced sexism in the workplace. Most of my bosses in all of my careers outside of two were all women. So I've never actually experienced it, been surrounded by really strong, very outspoken, independent women as leaders. So I haven't experienced it myself.
Have you ever witnessed it in the workplace?
Yes. One of my bosses, she was very eccentric, and when I first started, she was very subdued in what she would wear, and then I think she just finally wanted to express herself, and other people would talk. They would talk about what she was wearing or what she was not, and it was more focused on her clothing as opposed to her talent and her leadership.
Denise, how about you?
I think in the medical field, yes, we do as women. Luckily, the women play a big part in the medical field. There's definitely a strong presence of females in the nursing industry, but it happens. I think when you have physicians that are at a higher position, I think even, when you have supervisors that are at a higher position, I think they feel the ability to do that. And as women, even though we all have the same uniform, you're still based off of your uniform, your looks, and not just necessarily your skill and talent. So I think so. I've been fortunate to not to an extent as some of my colleagues, but it does happen.
Yeah. Do your colleagues confide in you when it happens, or is it something, I know it's hard to speak out on and kind of mention in the workplace?
I think the way that it happens, you build connection with these people that you're with 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. They in some part become your family or close friends. So it gets you thinking. It might come off as a casual thing or as a joking manner, like, hey, we don't put on makeup, and it's like, are you feeling okay? Or in just whatever sense that it can happen, it happens. So I think some of us, we take it in a joking manner because you have this trust or this relationship, not necessarily meaning that it's always aggressive. It's in micro sections, I guess. When it's at a severe state, yes, it does come about. It's a little harder to speak of, but as I mentioned, it's sometimes in a joking manner that we don't realize what's going on because of your trust with these people.
All right. How about you, Adam?
I've been sent sexually charged text messages by people I've worked for, both male and female. One when I was pretty young, maybe 17, and this was by an older woman that I worked for. And this wasn't on the job. This was, I assume she was maybe out drinking with friends, and she sent me something, and I didn't think much of it at the time. I just kind of laughed it off. But looking back, I didn't have that job much longer, and our relationship after that was very fraught. And that may have contributed to it, the fact that I didn't engage. I don't know, maybe I should have brought it up to a superior at the time, but it's scary when it's someone that has a position of power over you. You don't want to lose the job, but at the same time, you don't want to get involved in something that you don't know how to get out of. So, and that was only via text. I can't imagine what it's like in person, especially in a one-on-one office situation. So I feel a lot of sympathy for people that have gone through that.
Absolutely. Does anybody else here feel as if, when in an uncomfortable situation at work, that it is difficult to bring it up in fear of losing your job or feeling like coming to work every day is going to be uncomfortable after that?
With respect to feeling uncomfortable bringing something up, yes, I can say so. When I know when there's either tensions or some kind of conflict between other colleagues, and then you think that okay, am I in the wrong? Am I making a big deal about this? Am I going to be looked down upon for feeling a certain way about something? So I know I've been in a situation where, I just thought maybe, it's not a good idea to bring it up. I'll just weather through it. Not a big deal, and I'll just find a way around it. And that could create a tense situation among colleagues, and behaviors continue on. So I just wasn't comfortable enough to bring things up, and I think that's still something I do now. It's just not a habit to bring things up that bother me, or I observe something like that's probably not right. So now that I think about it, I still carry that around. I'm not the most comfortable bringing things up to superiors that I know some situation is not going the way it should.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that I find I'm the opposite. If I see something, I will say something. I'm more uncomfortable talking about money to my superiors than I am about engaging in misconduct, which is really bizarre to me, I guess. When you were saying, I'm like, why not? Why not stand up? But that's my only uncomfortable thing that I hesitate when I speak to superiors. Outside of that, no. Respect me, or this person isn't being respected, and something has to be done.
It's interesting because as you say that, it's almost as if the discussion of money is also revolved around the value of somebody and the respect that they deserve by being paid what they're worth. So it's almost, the discomfort talking about money is in some way coming from the same place of thinking that somebody's not going to understand your value or respect you enough to listen to what you believe you deserve. What about you, Tim? Have you?
Personally, I've never experienced it myself, but there was a time when I had a couple of subordinates that had an issue with each other. The guy kept, he was very persistent, and the girl just kept saying no. He couldn't take it for an answer. So we had to step in, talk to her first, because she didn't want to come forward with anything. She just let it know hey, this is happening, and we said whatever you want, we will do it. It's very hard for women to come out and say, hey, this guy is bothering me, because she's gonna, at least in my opinion, talking to her, she didn't want to be perceived as a disruptor. She didn't want to mess up any of the workflow, and the guys are just being guys, and so this one guy he took it too far, and she just wanted us to just tell him, hey, can you cut it out? But I was prepared to do whatever. I would easily fire the guy. It's not a big deal for me, but for her, I could only imagine what thought she was going through. It's really not fair to be put in that situation, especially when you're at work. You're just there to do a job.
Mm-hmm.
It's really frustrating.
We already kind of started this discussion, so I'm just going to kind of flow into it. Do you feel like it's your responsibility to bring this stuff up if you see it? Or is it, where does our duty lie when it comes to, I don't want to say exposing people, but kind of holding people responsible for their inappropriate actions or words?
I think so. People have families to feed. They want to make sure that they're taken care of. They don't want to step on any toes. The problem with change is that sometimes you have to go through glass, to make sure that at the other side, there's victory in change. A lot of people don't want to, they just want to go to work. They don't want to take that extra lead. They don't want to call somebody out because they fear of losing their job, specifically women and people of color. But I think that we have to. We have to be honest on each other, and especially if we see it on someone else, we have to do something about it. Yes, it's going to be uncomfortable, and yes, there are going to be ramifications, but at the end of the day, can you live with that?
I think it's tough because you're potentially making a life-altering decision for somebody else. And you got to think, am I doing it because I feel guilty about not doing it, or I'm doing it because I actually want to help this person? I actually want to change this situation for the better. So if you feel comfortable enough with the person that's being victimized, I would hope you would go to them and say, hey, I've noticed this. This may be something that you're not comfortable bringing up, but I want to understand it, and I want to help any way I can.
Mm-hmm.
I'm inclined to agree wholeheartedly, but in the perspective of being in a supervisory role, especially because it's your legal responsibility, but even as a human being and being empathetic and creating an environment where everyone can be comfortable and can do their job or fulfill their roles. And to what he was mentioning, is that person might be comfortable enough to address the issue, but as in a supervisory role, making sure the environment is such that they can walk into the space and feel comfortable enough to bring something up or discuss a certain matter, even if it's not directly addressed to an individual, but your job is recognizing what you can do and create that environment where it's a comfortable space to be.
Absolutely. And I feel beyond the workplace, it's almost our duty to each other as friends, as family, colleagues, whatever it may be, to create a comfortable space for each other, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's at a family dinner. We're not all here to coddle each other, but to allow people the space and safety is really important in my opinion. And so I kind of want to expand this sexism or sexual harassment, any experience you may have outside of the workplace. I know as a female, it's, we get catcalled. I was wearing a hoodie, sweats, and a mask the other day, and I got catcalled. I'm like, you can't even see my face. You can't even see me.
No, it happens so much that, I think as women, and going back to the sexual harassment, it's really hard to say, hey, this is what's going on, because as women, we have to have that backbone to push forward. These are things that not only happen in the workplace, but they happen so much outside that it's just kind of, when do you say this is just another case or something that you just easily shrug off because it happens so often? Or is this exact situation where I actually have to say something? It's easier when you know that you have a very strong support system, but there are people that do feel alone as female, not only at home, but outside, within their group of friends or even in the workplace. Like I myself, being Latina, I'm surrounded by machismo. And, even at a young age, it's like, oh, you're supposed to look like this, you're supposed to do this and that. So we fall into this, what we're supposed to do, that when other situations come to happen, we're just kind of like, all right, saddle up and push through, move forward. So, being Latina, as you mentioned, you're getting catcalled all the time. It happens, So you just learn to kind of go through it until it gets to a certain extent to where you have to say, okay, this isn't right, But at the same time, there has been situations within myself or with someone else that I know where we've come forward and it's just kind of like, well, it was just a moment thing, could have been worse, you'll be fine, keep going, So I think that makes it very difficult for women in the workplace because it happens outside of the workplace to come forward. As men, we ask, and a lot of men do, again, there's that sense of machismo, but support the women around you that you care about. With that, it makes it that much easier to be able to say, hey, this is what happened, and to get to a solution and get the safety and protection that they need.
For me, it's mind-boggling, the day in the life of a woman, because a lot of the things that you are literally walking through in life was created by men. What you have to consider, was that too much or was that not too much? You shouldn't have to go through that. It's mind-boggling that you have to question as to whether that came from, they're just, it's cute, I shouldn't be upset. You shouldn't have to go through it at all. And it's upsetting because at the same time, you're also looking for men in a way to help protect you or to help, to guide you in that world. And it's almost like men created the problem, now we're trying to fix it. And I don't know what solution it is for you to wake up in the morning and never have to go through that, and go to sleep at night never having gone through that. That sucks.
Sounds like it's becoming harder to pick your battles, right? Because there's so many things that you mentioned, like so many times you're getting catcalled, there's so many times you're being pressed about something, and you want to be able to tell someone, not cool, back off. But it's like you're gonna do that your entire experience. So,
But they shouldn't.
That's frustrating. You're absolutely correct. But just understanding that perspective, and like I'm just thinking like, damn, it sucks.
I think a lot of it relates to the concept of privilege. And I know privilege is a lot of times talked about in a racial perspective, but there's also male privilege. And like Rick was saying, there's things that we benefit from that we don't even think about. And then there's things that Denise goes through that we don't think about either because we've never experienced them. So because of our privilege, when we do see something, we need to call it out because it can't be normalized.
Yes.
I agree. Like I would never feel the same way walking in the middle of downtown at 12 o'clock. Like I have no problems thinking I'm not gonna get sexually assaulted right now, but I can imagine someone, a woman in that same situation, and there must be on edge. I can't imagine that. But we have to expand our awareness to, okay, maybe this situation may not be the same for a woman, and then I need to be responsible to, call things out when need be.
Well, we have to be responsible. We have to be honest on each other. As men, we have to call each other out.
Yeah, true.
When we see behavior that is going to be behavior that's going to be replicated and put forth to a woman, we have to call it out in front of each other. Just because women are not around, we have to make sure that we respect each other enough to say, this is not cool, don't say that. The woman doesn't have to be around for us to call each other out.
And I think it's good to, when you call someone out, you don't say, hey, like, you're bad, like, don't do that.
Right.
You have to approach it where, like, hey, you need to get them to acknowledge their own behavior and get them to understand what they did, like, is something they should feel bad about without saying, you need to feel bad about this.
Right.
It's a growing opportunity.
Exactly.
It's room for growth when you approach somebody. And I mean, I've been one, and I can admit this, that somebody has approached me about something that I didn't really realize that I had said that offended someone, and I get defensive because it feels like who you are is not right, instead of accepting it and allowing yourself grace to understand that you make mistakes and that it's okay as long as you learn from them.
Absolutely.
And to piggyback off what you were saying about walking downtown, it's kind of rough. I mean, from not walking downtown, but what's rough for me as a woman, I feel like, is wanting to trust everybody. I don't want to have the bias of not trusting a man while I walk down the street. Or, like when people say, oh, she clutched her purse, like, that those are also things that have been ingrained in us as women to protect ourselves and kind of already have a distrust for certain people or in certain situations. And so there is kind of a line there, I feel, where it's like, at what point do you trust somebody, but you're also on guard, but you don't want to stereotype, but you're also like, so it's a very blurry line. And when you do talk to each other, also teach your sons, because that's all where it starts, is at childhood. So
it's hard to sort of deprogram some of the behaviors that we've all been taught or we've all seen in movies and shows, but which is unfortunate. I don't want to have to think that I am a part of the problem. I want to be a part of the solution, and that's going to have to start with the younger generation.
Sounds like it's a risk. What you were saying, it's a risk of trying to be a little bit more trusting, because it's either be guarded and be safe, or take a chance and be assaulted, or be open to these negative influences.
yeah.
As you had mentioned, growing up with it, walking down the street with my mom, she'd pull me closer and be like, oh, be careful. My mom was actually sexually assaulted back in Mexico. She was coming back from the store, just literally down the street. Some guys pulled over, tried to pull her in the car, beat her up pretty bad. So my mom lived with that fear, with that anxiety, and she passed it on to us, to myself, to my sister, and it became a family situation. So walking down the street, she'd be like, hurry up, walk quickly, or, like, don't look at this person to not attract attention. And, even from the way that we dressed was, don't wear something that was too short. So it made me very self-conscious about myself, about the way that I dressed. Growing up, I wasn't comfortable wearing like dresses and shorts and skirts, and when I did, it was she's like, oh, you're too showy, you know, and I don't know if it was a Latina thing because some tend to be conservative, but it was definitely, I think, stemming from her experience that she passed down to us. And you know, you don't want to judge people, you don't want to judge the people that you see around you, but as you had mentioned, when do you trust somebody and how do you trust them? And then when you do trust them, like in the workplace, you build this family, and then something like that happens. So that makes it very difficult, and I think definitely as adults now, if you have your family, your children, it's very important to teach them, you know, what you think is right and what should be done in any given situation. And I think it's easier now with social media and with all these outlets to have a voice to be able to say these things, because it was definitely not easier to do that back then. You know, in the 10-year span of my workplace, I've definitely noticed it's easier now to say, hey, this is what happened, you know, knowing that people are going to suffer repercussions, because back then that wasn't always the case. So I think we're definitely moving forward. But it has definitely not been easy, at least for a woman, you know, and of color in my sense, you know. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I guess I want to just open up the floor to the men as well, as far as being in public. I mean, have you, Tim, ever experienced, you know, getting catcalled or feeling threatened? Because, I mean, it's not, you know, it's definitely heavily on women, especially BIPOC people, LGBTQ. But, I mean, have you felt like
Uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been like hit on and catcalled, which is really weird because I'm a guy, so you don't expect it. You're just really taken aback. I think I was like at 7-Eleven, and some girls like pulled up into a car, and they just say silly stuff. That's how I perceived it, but it did make me uncomfortable. I was just like, when I was like a kid, I was like 15, and they were like older. So it was a little weird, but yeah, it was. I just felt like it was a 1 in a million chance, and that would probably never happen again, and it hasn't. So I'm grateful for that, but it did make me super uncomfortable.
I just remember when you said, because you were what, younger or like teenager.
Mm-hmm.
I just remembered a situation similar to that. I think I was on the bus, and then there was these older women. I'm trying to think. I mean, they must not older, but you know, from a 15-year-old to they could have been 20 for all I know. Yeah, it was very uncomfortable. Like they were saying things to me or commented about me or like winking at me, and I just remember feeling like, what the? Like I felt so bad, and I just remember that feeling. One, because I was so taken aback. Like not that I was conscious, like I'm a man, this shouldn't be happening to me, but it was like that just never happened to me, and like this is a bad feeling. I couldn't wait. I think I got off early because I just needed to get out of that situation. Wow. Luckily, because they were very close, and so I kind of felt. Just thinking about that. So that may be the one situation that I remember having anything close to feeling uncomfortable in that kind of sense.
You know, it can happen to us one time, and we remember it for the
Yeah.
rest of our lives.
Yeah.
Like,
Imagine women that
exactly.
so listening to Denise's experience, like, I can't imagine how emotionally draining that is constantly. And that's energy that you're expending that should be going towards other parts of your life. So, you know, the fact that we remember just one thing that happened was 20 years ago and can laugh about it now. I don't know if you noticed, but when we talked about Tim being catcalled, we all laughed.
Yeah.
And that really shouldn't be the response to it. So, yeah, I don't know exactly where I'm going with this, but I would love to get to a point where not only do you not have to expend the emotional energy all the time, but we also don't laugh at something someone else may have gone through, even if it's something, you know, that wouldn't normally happen.
And the responsibility isn't for women, right?
Yeah.
Like I think you said, like, oh, don't wear this, don't behave a certain way, don't like you're attracting unwanted attention. It's like, how about you not give someone the unwanted attention? Like on my end, like I know I'm very I try to be very conscious about how I may come off and how I may make someone uncomfortable or comfortable or not.
Thank you for that. You know, and not everyone has that mentality. As I mentioned, I think everybody's moving forward with it, but you know, having a group that I get to, know and learn more from. Just learning from each other and taking that out into the next group that you hang out with or talk with and work. These are all the very small steps that will eventually make a difference, not just for us and our generations, but for the many more to come. And that's all we can do. That's our responsibility to move forward in the best way possible.
Absolutely. So I will move forward a little bit to the discussion of racism. Have you ever experienced racism?
Yes. Oh yes, definitely. Either it's going in a particular neighborhood that's not yours, Beverly Hills, or walking into a store. The classic stuff, walking to a store and feel like you're always being watched, or whenever I'm in a social situation or any space, immediately I recognize who else is like me. That's the first thing I do. It's almost innate. And I can, and when you know it's like, it's just you, it's like, okay, well, I'm on guard, right? It's just a feeling of being not on edge, but you're alert. And that's just foundational as opposed to the direct incidences or actions or behaviors.
I was blissfully ignorant for a very long time. Coming from Puerto Rico to Massachusetts, I never felt like I was the odd man out. I don't know if it was because of the way that I looked or the way that I learned how to speak English. I fit in. But when I worked for a nonprofit once, and the nonprofit put on this huge event every year, and one of the years the nonprofit allowed an organization to basically the organization's piece in this event was controversial. It was the AIDS Foundation, which does a lot of good in the world, but their piece had two men on a wedding cake looking like they were getting married, and it was not okay for a lot of people. I remember working one day, and this woman, I answered the phone and I said, "Hi, my name is Ricardo Gomez. How can I?" Before I even could finish my spiel, she was like, "I don't care if your name is Carlos, Fernando, or whatever second class name you have. This piece that the AIDS Foundation is doing, that you guys are doing," and it was always about you. Like, she kept saying you, like that. It weighed so heavy on me that, first of all, this woman just called me out of my name, and she just because I have a Latin name, she's like, you are second class. And in my head, during her long spiel, I was like, this is not real. This is not happening. This is not happening to me. I'm not experiencing this. And then I remember just like trying to calm her down and say, "Ma'am, I really think that you should probably contact the AIDS Foundation. It is their piece in this event. We just allow them to come into the event." And she stopped me and said, "You don't get to tell me what to do. I tell you what to do. Or did you forget? You are the second class citizen."
Oh my God.
At that point in time, I was shaking. I was uncontrollable in nerves, and then my coworker saw that, and I hung up. I didn't know what else to do, and then I just sort of had to get up and go to the bathroom, just like put water on my face, like literally the thing that you see in a movie when somebody goes through this experience, and that I had to calm myself down. I did not live in a world before that ever happened to me. That happened in movies, that happened in TV shows, and then that happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
That changed my perspective on life. Fortunately or unfortunately, in a way where I didn't view people the same way. I officially lived in a world where people looked at me and saw my name and thought less of me. And I had no control over that. Regardless of what I did in life, people will still look at me or see my name and think that I'm less than them. And that broke my spirit. And it took a long time to come out of that. But I don't think I will. Anybody that goes through that experience is officially haunted for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even a big situation like that. Like you mentioned microaggressions earlier, sometimes people say things that they believe are harmless, but can be taken very badly. I mean, that's like me when people say, where are you from? Where are you from? Where are you from? You're so ambiguous looking. Like, you know, I don't take offense to that because I feel it's pure curiosity, but there have been times when I'm working in a restaurant and someone says, how long have you been in the country? And I'm like, my whole life, my English is perfect. Not that that should mean anything, but who are you to ask me that question and assume that about my life? You know, are you Mexican? And then I get offended and they're like, what do you have against Mexicans? Nothing, but I don't like you categorizing all brown people as Mexicans. It's not, you know, okay.
Or people being surprised that you have an education. It's like, oh, you went to college. So, yes, I did.
No, taking it back to speaking English, you know, I grew up in Lancaster when I was young. I didn't know that, you know, color was a thing. A lot of, and I was a child, it's innocent things. You have your best friends, I had a little, you know, I had different kinds of friends. When I moved here to Pasadena, I was in the first grade. I moved in the mid-year, and they're like, oh, why don't you come from Mexico? And I was born here. Again, I was young, but that stuck with me. You know, as a girl, you know, I had braids in my hair, and they were like, when did you come from Mexico? And I'm like, why would they say that to me? Growing up, I understand that now, but that lived and that stayed with me. I moved to Oregon, Springfield, Oregon, and I was there. I was at the store, and this lady comes up to me, and she's speaking slow, like broken down, like, do you need help? And I was like, no, thank you, I'm fine. She's like, oh my goodness, your English is perfect.
Oh, no.
Where did you learn to speak so well? I'm like, actually, I was born here in California, so, but thank you. And she just flushed, and
So
she's
she
like,
knew.
oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, thank you, I can find my way around the store. I actually live here. And she's like, oh, okay. But then after that, I was just, you know, and it took me back just because it hadn't happened to me for so long, but it does happen. People will look at you and think they need to slow down with what they're saying, or, you know, even in my own culture it happens. They'll speak Spanish and they hear that we speak very well English, and they'll say, oh yeah, she thinks she's all that because she speaks very good English and she has a, you know, whatever situation it is. So, I mean, as much as it happens outside of our culture, it happens within our own cultures or even at home, but it makes it that much more difficult when it's, you know, when it's not. And you grow up with it, and it definitely, as Rick said, you know, it stays with you, and it just, these are all little pieces that, you know, you take with you for the rest of your life.
And you don't even understand why until
Later on, right?
Absolutely, you absorb things, and then later you're like, oh, maybe this is bothering me now, and this is the root of different emotions that I feel based on conversations that I've had.
It can come out in the worst of times. Just that broken moment, and you just remember that moment, and you're done. I'm done for the night, and it's not something that I want to carry, and we shouldn't have to. We shouldn't have to go through these experiences. But I mean, I don't know how to get rid of it. I'm in therapy, proudly, but it's something that I deal with. Not just with that, but just with other things. But it is something that it's gonna. I don't know if we'll ever get over that. If we'll ever actually be happy enough with ourselves to not let something like that bother us.
Does anyone else feel that way, or?
I may be a little more optimistic than you are. I feel like, in general, our culture, our society at large is moving a little bit farther along in understanding other people, especially being in a city like LA where there's literally everyone. So there's a little bit more sensitivity and understanding of other people's perspectives. So I'm a little more optimistic. However, you know, there's certain pockets where you'll still get a weird look, or you'll get a comment, or some of those microaggressions, which we are a little sensitive to, and others might think is like, oh, it's not a big deal. It's like, well, when you get it 1,000 times a day, it weighs on you. But I think we're getting better.
Well, that's what people don't understand, is that you can get it 1,000 times a day. And
Yeah.
the moment that they are presented in front of you and they say something microaggressively,
And
it's-
then you
and
react
you tip
to it.
out and you react. It's like, whoa, why are you so defensive? Hold on a second, you don't know what my day looked like.
Right.
Do you think it's important when you do feel offended to speak up in that moment, because I do know that I personally can accept responsibility for having said a microaggression and not having found out until later in the future or sometimes immediately. And like I said, gotten defensive, but then learned that. Do you think it's important or it makes a difference to bring it up right away versus, holding on to it?
I'd say find an appropriate manner to do it in. And I think you mentioned it earlier about not being accusatory, but it's like a point from understanding. It's like, hey, you said this, that's not probably the something you should continue and explaining why, instead of like, hey, you're an asshole for saying that, you shouldn't do that, and kind of coming down on people, because people get defensive. But finding an appropriate way to give a teachable moment, and just picking your battles. Sometimes it's, it's not going to be effective right now. Maybe the next time, but find a moment and then kind of break that down.
Has anyone experienced a moment when maybe somebody has brought up something that you have said that has offended them?
Yes. Yes.
Many times.
Right.
I feel like that laughter comes from a very nervous realness of like understanding that this is a very deep, heavy subject, and it's kind of like
more so because you know what you did, and you recognize, like, come on, you were in the wrong there. And just thinking about the situation and maybe who you were with is like, okay, it's like, my bad, I know I messed up or something. I think that's where that comes from, and just knowing that I'm better after that. That's why I would, because I've said many probably to you, many inappropriate things, and then got called out for it. You're absolutely correct. I probably should have said that, across the line. Because when we get comfortable, we say all kinds of stuff that any other context would you'd get some heat for it. So we slip.
I was going to say, recognizing it it's progress. Rather than look back at your past behavior with shame, sometimes it can be good to look back at your past behavior and realize what you've learned from it, and how you learned from it, and how you can help others learn in the same way. So I sure I could look back to when I was a kid. I grew up in a mostly white neighborhood and wasn't exposed to different perspectives, and I probably did and said things, because of the way I was raised, and also just because of my lack of perspective, that I would be very ashamed of now. But the fact that I would be ashamed of those things now makes me feel like I've grown.
You grow with every experience, and we're at a point where we're trying to correct all of our wrongdoings within ourselves, along with our peers and with the people around us. And recognizing is the first step in any situation, and it's such an important step, because your eyes are open, you're aware of the wrongdoings, and that's what creates the preventative. And
it's the accountability to others and for ourselves.
Ourselves.
Shame is a great tool.
Shame.
I know that, it's
I feel like that's such a
2021.
Cowboy.
Shame sounds like such a negative word, but to bring shame upon yourself for doing something you do grow from it. To shame other people for behaving and acting and saying certain things. At one point, I always say, it's like, what did you want me to do? What else did you want me to do? How did you want me to say this? Me saying this is actually making you react. I'd rather you react than you do nothing at all. At some point, you just have to shame someone. You have to shame someone, and you have to shame yourself sometimes. That was shameful, and you grow from it. It's harder to be wrong in life than it is to be right. Even whatever trajectory you took in terms of being right and learning and educating yourself, it's always been harder to be wrong. But you learn from that, especially if it's thrust upon your face.
Yeah, shame is a very important emotion. I mean, we're laughing about it. We're saying, hey, it has a religious context, obviously.
Right.
But without shame, how do you learn anything?
True. I think it's, and I go back to the accusatory part of it. It's easier for me to shame my friends because they understand where it's coming from, right? As opposed to doing that to someone who's not in that same kind of circle. It's like, don't talk to me that way, or you're overreacting, and it's harder for them to have that teachable moment. So I try to avoid that, and really trying to make people understand, or coming from it from a non-aggressive manner, because at the end of the day, like, I don't want you to repeat the behavior, or else they're going to associate that learning moment with aggression and a negative emotion, and they're going to continue to do whatever they're going to do. So I will happily shame you, my friend, for anytime you step out of line.
Thank you.
And I expect the same. But just know it's from a place of, come on, you know you messed up. This is what you shouldn't do. Like, let's move on.
You touched upon something really important. It's like shaming somebody that you might not know. I have done that. It has worked in some instances. I don't know if it's because of my delivery or because I just say it with a smile and or it backfires and I get called a sarcastic asshole. But I need to walk away from that situation knowing that I did the best that I could do. So for me, it's not necessarily about the reaction and what happens afterward. It's about whether or not I did my job to walk away with my dignity, my respect, or somebody else's dignity and somebody else's respect.
I see what you mean. I just feel like sometimes it's not my job to teach you. I'm gonna remove myself from a situation, and I'm more than likely than not, I'm never gonna see you again. Am I gonna have a little impact on your life? Probably not. I'm gonna move out of the situation before it becomes a thing. In some other situation where there may be opportunity for an additional interaction, that there's a little bit more investment for me. Otherwise, I'm just gonna back off. Like, you know what, this isn't.
Yeah,
I don't need to step in here.
That's very important. We can't rely on other people to always teach us these things. There has to be self-motivation. If you're not self-motivated to get better and you expect everyone else to teach you how to get better, you're not going to get better.
Being handed lessons. I mean, and that goes with, the accountability in ourselves, noticing the things that I've said to people or that have been said to me. If I had thought a little more about how that actually affected me, it might have prevented me from doing that to somebody else. We do have like about 10 more minutes, so I do want to just move on to the last question, which is, how do you think mental health affects those contributing or experiencing sexism and racism?
People are becoming more comfortable. Like you just mentioned, I'm going to therapy, probably. Like,
Yeah.
Great. Like
You
10 years
would never hear
10
that.
years ago, they were like,
Especially from a Latino community. Like my parents thought that if you went to therapy, you're crazy.
You're broken.
They saw progress in me, and my mom really just like opened, like she's like, just, what did your therapist say?
Yeah,
So which is great because I needed it. Being diagnosed with anxiety was one of the healthiest things that actually ever happened to me. And especially living in our times right now, if I had said that maybe 10 years ago, people might have thought that I was crazy, and they might have thought that some of the symptoms that I had because I may have had an anxiety induced attack or panic attack, that this guy needs help. But like the kind of shrinkish, tied up in a straitjacket. Now I feel like way more myself than I ever felt years ago, because I know what I can do. I know my triggers. Sometimes it's a harder day to deal with it. And does that affect racism and sexism? Does that? Absolutely, because you don't know where that person's coming from. That's why you have to have the conversation. But mental health is something that we are talking about, that we have progressed a lot on, and I am so thankful for it.
Yeah, those experiences create stressors, and that stress manifests itself in sometimes unhealthy ways, mentally and physically. And now we're at a place where people are flexing that they're getting their mental health taken care of because of these negative experience with racism or negative experience with sexism or all the isms. It has its effect mentally, and being able to go get that helped or addressed, it's a great thing that people are doing. I remember being younger, and you're right, it is a cultural thing. I remember being younger and foregoing therapy. Like, it was a thing, like, do you want to see a therapist? Do you want to have some therapy? And I remember distinctly saying no, because I thought, like, I'm not crazy. Like, I don't need this. I'm good. If I were to do that now, we're like, I'll take it.
Right.
And there's a stigma where you only go to therapy when something's wrong.
Right.
When you're sad, when you're emotional, that's when you go to therapy instead of using it as a maintenance tool and a growth tool, because you can always learn more about yourself.
It's a toolbox.
In my opinion, it's a toolbox. You can have multiple therapists if you want. Has anyone else found, benefit from therapy?
Oh, yeah.
Denise or
Absolutely. I mean, there's not a single person on earth who has the strength or intelligence to work through every emotion they're feeling themselves.
Right.
You need to get it out. You need to have feedback, and you need to bounce things off of somebody else. And going to therapy in college, for example, which was my first time going to therapy, it changed my whole perspective on everything. I obsessed about little things that put into a perspective from somebody else, like, oh, this isn't going to matter in a month. Like, I don't obsess about those things anymore. And it's completely changed my perspective on my life.
That's great. I'm in the process of going to therapy. Growing up, going to therapy, first of all, the resources coming from, my family, working parents, full time. Back then it was just like, oh, well, if you're going to therapy, it's because you have the money to go to therapy, or because, and so for me, I think growing up again in a Latino household, it's that whole machismo thing where it's like, you know what, you just gotta build a bridge, get over it, you'll come out stronger, and you'll be fine. So growing up, I had a friend that had passed away at a very young age. I went to therapy at school, but even the therapist would, she would always ask, how does that make you feel? And I'm just like, I got so used to pushing my feelings off to the side where I'm like, I don't know how I feel about it. But I think now as an adult, and now that, mental health is such a big, pillar in somebody's life, or such a big part that's so important, I decided, I'm like, okay, now's the time that I do need to go to therapy, because there are a lot of things that, growing up, I suppressed, and I felt like, oh, it was just a moment in my life. And something that I always taught myself is that it could be worse. One thing, you want to be optimistic about, your future, and the next day everything's going to be better. But there are certain things where you say, you can't look over and always say it could be worse, because this is your worst. So I think, recognizing that you need help is very, very important, which is something that I've done. And I'm like, okay, I need help that I'm not going to get from my family, that I'm not going to get from my friends. It's what I'm going to get from myself, and a professional will definitely, hopefully, guide me through these things. But I did grow up with, you don't need therapy. You need to calm down. I would have anxiety, and they're just like, you're being dramatic. That's the word. Thank you. You're being overly dramatic about a situation, and it's just like, but I'm not. This is how I feel.
Yeah.
So mental health is just so important, I think, for everybody at any age. I think it's great to be able to have that resource now that I didn't before.
and validation for
Yeah.
your own
Absolutely.
feelings.
Yeah, and we're talking about a therapy in like an official context, like she's saying.
Right.
She couldn't go to her family or friends for some of this stuff, and for a lot of things, you can't go to your family or friends because they're too close to the situation.
Right.
But you need to. I'm not a licensed therapist. I don't know if anybody else here is, but you need to be there. Like, your friends and family need to know that you're there for them to bounce their feelings off of. Even if it's just listening, like they can vent at you, that's therapy. And we need to be there for people that we love.
Right. And being there is just that. Being there, listening, having conversations with not necessarily an end in sight or a conclusion. You know what I mean? I think one thing that I've experienced, or, I don't want to say be guilty of, but I've done, is taking people's problems on. And that's when someone confides in me, I can't do that. I'm just here as a sponge to validate your feelings, be here for you, to feel like you are seen and heard. And I think a lot of people are a little standoffish when it comes to other people's problems, because they are I don't want to say they are, because I'm not speaking for them, but I have felt sometimes that, oh my God, are they looking for answers through me?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, you have to, in our old, at least in my experience, being older, I'd say in the last several years, 10 years, whatever, having to learn that this isn't a situation for solutions, this is a situation people just need to hear. And I had to learn that eventually, so I had to learn to just become a listener and just respond accordingly, but this isn't about me fixing your problem or you finding a fix, just being someone that they can speak to as one step in their process of, getting better or finding therapy or their catharsis or whatever that looks like.
Yeah,
It's been a problem for me.
and relating this back to the sexism and racism, if somebody knows that they can come to you and that you will listen, they're more likely to come to you with sexism or racism they've experienced. So that's, it's just like an enclosed loop that's going to solve our own problems and our friends' problems and our coworkers' problems. So I mean, just listening is so incredibly important.
And checking yourself. You just made a great point. If I can feel comfortable with coming to someone and say, hey, I said this or did this, should I have not done that? Or did I?
Yes.
Did I just
Yeah.
So it becomes another opportunity to.
Accountability.
Yeah.
That's the big word, accountability. Just knowing that and acknowledging that something is wrong. As I mentioned, a lot of people go through things as jokes or, like you're just being dramatic or, I just only complimented your hair or the way that you look or, I know you speak English, but I was just joking about having an accent. Whatever situation it is, it's the acknowledgement and the accountability that we have to take first within ourselves to recognize that there's wrongdoing in any situation, and then being able to let other people know. And as you mentioned, like the certain time or place or a certain way to say things and not create a bigger conflict than what the initial situation was.
Absolutely. Well, I feel like that was a great wrap-up point. Did anyone else have anything they wanted to share before we do conclude this open forum?
Just that self-awareness is hugely important. Aware of what you do, how you behave, and thinking about the other person, right? It may take some more processing power, it may take some more brain power of thinking about these things, but we live in a world with other people. And if we took a little bit more time to process our empathy, I think we'll be better people for it.
We judge ourselves on our intentions, but we judge other people on their actions.
Ooh.
So we need to start trying to judge other people by what might we have done in that situation.
I like that a lot. I love that. Oh, that's going to stick with me, as well as a lot of other stuff. Well, thank you for joining us on this open forum. I hope that all of you can walk away with some words of wisdom from each other and continue these conversations with each other or other people. And hopefully those of you watching, this is a starting off point for some conversations within your groups and family as well. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. You're welcome.
If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, there are ways to get help. Please visit the video description for resources in therapy and guidance tools for having challenging conversations.